Welcome to the FITDRIVERS Podcast, sponsored by 10th Street, connecting carriers and drivers to make life easier, pre and post-hire. From efficient and seamless recruiting to tools that keep drivers engaged and compliant and on the road. 10th Street helps you market, hire, retain, and grow. Learn more at 10thstreet.com. Okay, well, listen, everybody, we're back. I'm really excited about this segment, part 2, with my good friend Scott. We are going to talk about supplements this show, and I tell you, you're gonna get a real education, because I remember the very first time when I met Scott, and we went, and he really educated me on why all supplements are not the same. And I had my first opportunity to actually do a tour, if you remember. That was Nature's Way, I think it was, Scott.
It was. That's right.
And you taught me something I had, so basic to you, I'm sure, but I didn't know. But explained to me that how sometimes when you get to the bottom of that barrel, those supplements aren't the same as the ones at the top of the barrel. And so I wanted to really take this time, this advantage while we have you, and all your information and knowledge to educate people out there. And let's start with that, really, Scott. Explain to the listeners the reason that all supplements quality is not the same.
Well, the way the supplement industry works, there is some oversight. I think it's a common misconception that FDA doesn't have the power to regulate supplements, but that's not true. They do. And in particular, they can regulate supplements through inspections of facilities and through audits and whatnot, just like they can a food manufacturer or a pharmaceutical manufacturer. Wow. There are so many different supplement brands and manufacturers out there, though, that it is difficult for them to get around and do the inspections as often as maybe they should, or to be able to do everything that is 100% of the things that we'd like to see happen. So a lot of it does fall on the manufacturers themselves and on the marketers. Most marketers don't actually make their own supplements. Most of them have somebody else make it, a contract manufacturer, we call it. So these contract manufacturers are making the majority of the products out there. There are a few that are vertically integrated and do it all themselves. Nature's Way is a good example. So you find among that group that has it made by contract manufacturers, you do find people that get into the industry, do something very quickly, and then get out again. And they really don't care that much about, what kind of quality they have. And it's difficult to police that and difficult to do anything about it. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, beware of those companies that have a short history, that you have no understanding of who they are or what they're doing, because, for all they're having something made in one way and they're labeling it in another way, and it's very difficult to find them. So stay with established brands that are larger, that have a longer history, because they have a stake in making sure that what they're doing and how they're producing it is done in the right way. They're not just looking to make a quick buck and get in and get out.
Yeah, it's so true, because we know that, it's so much of it is like you had started your explanation about. A lot of people are just marketing companies, right?
Yep.
And they've got the wherewithal, the dollars, and push the brands out there, and you don't really know. And that's like another thing I wanted to touch on, like today's world, social media. My gosh, there's, whatever the new research comes out with, that you need this, you need that. There seems like there's a new brand coming out, right? That they've researched all this, and now here's what you need. And, of course, it's all about getting you on the monthly draft, right?
Yep.
The reorder. And it's very confusing for people, right?
It is. It's really hard to sort through all that. I mean, you go to Amazon, which is arguably the biggest, marketplace for supplements around. You go to Amazon and you type in, let's say you're interested in turmeric, and you're going to get hundreds of results, right? Yeah. Now the ones at the top are going to be the best sellers. That's the way Amazon's algorithm works. And in general, because they are the largest sellers, they have the largest volume, they have the most at stake, those companies probably are doing a pretty good job. But it is hard to know. There are things that you can do, and unless somebody's willing to engage in outright fraud and lie about it, which is rare, honestly, there are things you can look for. You can look for some certifications. So you can look and see if they have a certification from something like NSF or USP. These are organizations that test and certify products and help to guarantee it, like the Good Housekeeping seal that I think people are familiar with. So you can look for certifications and make sure that, it's made in a GMP, that stands for Good Manufacturing Practices, made in a GMP facility. So looking for things like that can really help. And then, the brand itself, maybe just do a quick search and see how long they've been around and if there's any other information that way. And if you can't find answers relatively easily and relatively quickly to some of these questions, then I would suggest, you move on. The other thing you can do for the simple stuff, like if you want to get a good multivitamin or you want to get calcium or something like that, you can get it from Costco, because Costco does a good job of vetting the people that they put into their facility, and they're standing behind those products.
Right.
They have their guarantee, which extends to those products too. So you go there, and that way you get the advantage of their machine and their care and concern. So you can get all the kind of commodity stuff from places like that, and that helps a lot too.
So that brings me to my next question. Multivitamin. Is that really a pretty sure go-to established vitamin supplement to take? Like, obviously we're talking about truck drivers. We know that their food choices are limited and they don't get all the really good, natural food, good food, closest to the source, right? Is that a good go-to safe bet to get a supplement? Because, there's all kinds of different, you talk about E's and D's and B's and all that, but is a good multivitamin a safe bet?
Yeah, in general it is. I would avoid the really expensive multivitamins, because I do think that at that point there's some overkill there, and you're paying for stuff that maybe has a very, very minimal incremental value. You're going to get 90% of the value of a multivitamin just by getting a standard multivitamin, instead of going for the expensive $60, $70, $80, $90 a month kind of stuff. So, but the data on multivitamins over the years, there's been a lot of different studies, and a lot of people have looked at it. And if you look at it from a disease prevention point of view, the data is muddy. It's hard to really sort all that stuff out, which makes sense, because you got so many different ingredients, so many different types of multivitamins, and such a variety of conditions and risk factors among the population and everything. That's difficult science to do. But if you look at the data on B vitamins in particular, for example, there is some pretty good evidence out there that simply taking, a B vitamin, which won't cost you very much at all, and is in all the multivitamins, if you take that every day, you can probably extend the health of your brain and your cognitive health for, a few years. So that data is actually pretty good. We also know that people who take a little bit of extra magnesium, women who take a little bit of extra calcium, that their bone health can be better. And that leads, if your bones aren't strong, you're not able to exercise as much, you don't have as much mobility, and the lack of mobility leads to other problems. So there's a good rationale as you get older, and in particular, if you have a poor diet, for taking a multivitamin. At the very least, it's not going to harm you. And I think that's the important thing here is you can take one of these things and not have any serious or, negative consequences from taking it. And the upside is relatively good. It may do just a small amount of good, but it also may do a moderate amount of good. And I think that's a pretty good justification.
So how does one then, which it was really good advice. I mean, just because it costs more doesn't mean it's the best, right? So how does one, when we're talking about the middle stream, professional driver out there, and then income obviously and is a concern. So how does one find a decent standard multivitamin?
Well, again, if you go to one of the, retailers out there, and you get a well-known brand, a brand that's been around, that has a long history, you're going to do just fine. So you can go to Walmart or Target or wherever, and you can pick up a multivitamin from one of the well-known major brands, and you'll be great. Same with Costco and other places. Costco has their, Kirkland House product, which is great. So any of those are going to be fine. I wouldn't try and go out and find something that is obscure or that costs a lot of money, frankly, in a multivitamin. I don't think you need that. So just get it from a major brand, from a retailer or an outlet that you trust and that you know is going to exercise some diligence, and you'll be good.
So sticking to the name brands is really the basic information about that, about how to be safe. So, and what about adding supplements to that? I'm use myself as an example. So I don't eat meat, and so I have a relatively low immune system. So for years, I've always been, I guess you'd say, a vitamin junkie. I always have a good multivitamin, and I take an extra, and something that I get this different information on is like vitamin C. I'm just a huge believer in vitamin C. I take it every day, and I'm convinced that through my history, I very, very seldom ever have any issues as far as colds and that type of thing. And also, I'm a big believer in garlic, and those type of supplements help fight off, because I'm obviously understand, natural antibiotic, right, that helps deter a lot of that. And so I take a good reputable multivitamin, I also supplement it, Scott, and I take extra vitamin C and B and E as well, and fish oil.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, you're hitting on a bunch of the big ones. The one that I would mention in that same category is most people could benefit from it is vitamin D. The information on vitamin D now is really, really interesting and actually quite good. That vitamin D plays a role in a lot of different processes in the body. So vitamin D is linked with better cognitive health. It's linked with better immune health, better gut health. There's all kinds of things. Most people don't realize that even though we call it vitamin D, it's actually a hormone. And it's a hormone that your body produces in response to sunlight, right? When you are exposed to UV sunlight, the UV spectrum in sunlight, that creates a kind of biochemical cascade through the skin that ends up in the production of vitamin D. And that's what most people have associated it with over time. And vitamin D is involved in particular with the metabolism of calcium. So you need vitamin D in order to use calcium properly to make bone. But it has all these other effects too, like a lot of hormones do. So, part of the problem is that with our modern lifestyles, we don't spend as much time outside as we did ancestrally, right? We're not hunter-gatherers. We're not out there for 8 or 10 hours a day. So those of us that work on a computer, work in an office, work maybe in a truck or whatever, just don't get enough sunlight. And vitamin D is one of those things that I think everybody potentially could really benefit from. If you want to know, you can go to a doctor and they can do a vitamin D test and see what your levels are in blood, and they can give you a recommendation. And usually about 2,000 milligrams is enough, unless you're seriously deficient, and then they might suggest you take, 5,000 milligrams. But so 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams of vitamin D daily, I think just about anybody could probably benefit from that. A little extra vitamin C may or may not help. One of the things that I like about the way you started out that question, though, is you said, I don't eat meat. Well, that means you have certain requirements that not everybody would have. Right. And that's the thing that you need to do, is you need to kind of examine yourself, your situation, the things that make you exceptional or make you a little different than other people. And that's where supplements can make a difference, I think. It's in the name of the word, or it's in the word that is the name for this category, which is supplement. Supplement is something you add to, your normal, your base, and it sits on top of that, right? So you want to look at those things that you need to supplement because they're missing in your diet, or because you have exceptional requirements, or you have risk factors that may be genetic, they may be lifestyle, they may be whatever, and you want to supplement that part of your nutritional profile in order to compensate for it. And that's what supplements are good at doing, and they're good at helping you with that. So me, for example, I have dry eyes. I just naturally don't produce as much of the oils that help to lubricate your eye. So I take fish oil to help compensate for that.
Yeah.
Right. So you need to kind of understand what your needs are and examine that, and that'll help you understand what kind of supplements you need to work with.
I wanted to back up there on something you talked about, the vitamin D. When that research came out pretty heavily here, can't remember how long ago it's been, but they quickly identified truck drivers are people that probably suffer from not getting enough vitamin D because they do sit in the cab most of the time, right? They're not outside.
Yeah, makes sense.
Great value.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that. I think that's a really good thing that you can do. And the good thing about vitamin D is you don't need a lot of it. So you can get a little tiny soft gel. It's not even a very big pill. And you can get, a 3-month supply of it for less than $20. I mean, it's cheap, easy to take, very safe, doesn't have side effects. It's one of these things that it's very easy to recommend for most people. Yeah.
Yeah. And something else that actually a doctor once told me this in speaking, like talked about calcium and so forth, especially with the lady drivers out there. Is it true, Scott, that I was in a seminar at one time and the doctor advised, they said, if you take, a lot of people take their supplements in the morning, right? Mm-hmm. And if you take calcium, and then you drink coffee, it wipes out the effects. Have you ever?
So here, this is kind of an interesting thing. If you take too many acidic foods, then you can actually create some difficulties with calcium. Part of it has to do with the way that calcium can be absorbed in from your digestive system into your bloodstream. But the other problem is that, like athletes who drink too much soda, so they get too much carbonic acid or they get too much phosphoric acid or whatever, that can actually lower the pH, making things more acidic. And when you do that, one of the ways that the body can compensate for that is it can use calcium to make things more basic, to raise the pH. So acidic things are things that have a low pH, and basic things are things that have a high pH. And you want it to be relatively neutral, both in your gut and also in the bloodstream. Right. And the body can help to regulate that system by using calcium. So if you have a huge amount of acidic foods, and coffee is one of those foods, then you'll end up actually not being able to utilize the calcium nearly as well, or you may even leach calcium from other parts of the body like bone and such in order to compensate for it. So you just have to be aware of the fact that if you're a person who drinks a lot of soda, drinks a lot of coffee, that there's a good chance that you're going to need additional calcium because you have a very acidic diet.
Interesting. So, and then back to about the vitamin C, is there better value in elderberry supplements opposed to vitamin C for that?
Well, they work differently.
Yeah.
And, they're working on different mechanisms of action. So if you look at elderberry, echinacea, astragalus, arabinogalactan, there's all these things that are, kind of immune stimulating or immune regulating, and they work in different ways. So to say, should I be taking this or this? Well, in some cases you may need both because they're working in different mechanisms of action. And so I don't look at it that way. If immune health is one of your main concerns and one of the things that you're the most worried about, then taking a certain base level of vitamin C, that's a good idea. But you may find that one of these other botanicals also helps you in a way that vitamin C can't. And that could be an interesting thing for you to look at. But it's going to be a little bit individual. There's people respond in different ways. People's immune systems work in different ways. So you may have to experiment with that a little bit individually and see what you can add on to the vitamin C that helps you and works for your particular physiology.
Yeah. I have done that. And like we talked about in our first show, you have access to the best lab, right, which yourself, and find out what works best.
It is for sure. And
I just found that that vitamin C really had the value that I needed, more so than the others. Because I think you can. That's my next question. You can't overdo it, right? I mean, you can take more supplements than you really need to be taking.
Well, you can overdo it for sure. You can overdo it, one, because it's expensive to do all that, right? So you're spending all this money on stuff that's not giving you a whole bunch of value. That's not a good thing. But taking too much of something can also be problematic for you. There are people who, this is a pretty extreme example, but people who were so convinced that beta carotene and vitamin A was good for them, and they would drink carrot juice to the point where their skin would turn orange, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because it's a fat soluble vitamin A, beta carotene are fat soluble vitamins. So your body doesn't flush them out as quickly as it did if they were water soluble. It actually retains some of that in fat cells, and you have a lot of fat cells under the skin. And so eventually these people would turn orange. And it sounds comical, but at some point that can actually be harmful for you as well. Fat soluble vitamins in particular, you do have to be a little more careful with. Vitamin A, vitamin E, we talked about vitamin D. Vitamin D has a pretty wide range of tolerability. I wouldn't go above, 5,000 IU, for example, without the advice of a physician, and I'd keep it a little lower. Same with vitamin A, I would keep that quite low. 5,000 IU or less, 3,500 probably is better for people. So, and we also know that there's botanicals that you can take. If you take too much of them, they can be hard on your liver. So I wouldn't overdo it. And I think there's a tendency to think that because something comes from a plant, because it's natural, that it's harmless. That is not the case. Heroin comes from a plant, right? Yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of natural substances that are, if used incorrectly or you use too much of them, can be very, very harmful. One of the things that I think is hard to get your head around is this idea that all medicines and all highly biologically active substances are poisons. It's just a matter of dose. It's how much you take.
Right.
So, and in fact, if it doesn't have the potential for harm, it probably doesn't have the potential for good.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the fact that it can change your physiology in a somewhat dramatic way that makes it useful. So you have to be careful about that. There has to be balance there, because anything that is able to change your physiology, in a particular direction fairly strongly and noticeably, does have the potential for harm. So I encourage people to start out by taking, one thing, see how it does for them, listen to their body, as you said, use their body as a laboratory, and then add one thing to it and kind of pay attention to that, and start out with a moderate and conservative approach to that, and not overdo it, because I think that you can, and then you don't know why you're having problems or you're having side effects, because people have just tried everything all at once, that shotgun approach, and you can't really use your body as a lab if you do that.
Yeah. And I personally, it's how I've done it for years. I test, I usually give it 30 days. Yep. And I see if it makes a difference, and then I'll switch, and I can usually always tell, wow, I felt better on the other product. I could tell a difference. And so I know, right? And usually it takes about a month or so, 5 weeks at the most, and I can tell a difference. So
there you go.
That's one of the, so staying on the stream of drivers, and we know what they, so many of them fight. The number one cause of most drivers getting eliminated or short-term cards, Scott, is blood pressure.
Yeah.
So are there some supplements out there that can help aid for that? And
There are things that can help. Before we start this conversation, though, and I'm sure most of your drivers know this, blood pressure is, it's a very serious thing, and it's something that you as an individual won't know that you have high blood pressure. They call it the silent killer for a reason, because, there's no outward signs of it until you have a pretty serious problem or event due to blood pressure. So it's something that you don't want to mess around with, and you don't want to take it too lightly. If you're told by a physician or someone you have high blood pressure, you need to take it really seriously, and you're not going to know. You can't use your body as a lab in this case, because you're not going to get the feedback until the feedback is really, really severe.
Right.
So that's the first thing to say. And the second thing is, anything that you try, if you know you have high blood pressure, you should talk to your physician, to your pharmacist before you try anything. So any of the things that I'm going to mention, you need to make sure that a healthcare professional weighs in before you try them or before you work with it. And frankly, that goes for all supplements. It's a good idea if you're taking medications to make sure there's no conflict or contraindications. That said, there was a really interesting study that was actually just published August 29th, I believe, in the New England Journal of Medicine of this year. And what they showed was that people who have higher dietary levels of potassium have significantly lower risks of cardiovascular disease and high blood pressure. So just simply having more potassium in your diet can help quite a bit. And one of the simple things you can do is, instead of adding salt that's made from sodium, add salt that's made from potassium to your diet.
Oh, wow.
So if you're cooking, or, you're even eating in a restaurant, if you're a person who reaches for the salt shaker, carry your own shaker of potassium salt with you. The taste is a little bit different, but you'll get used to it very quickly.
Right.
And it's so much better for you than using sodium salt. And increasing that potassium, what this study showed is that it can really have some pretty cool effects, some pretty cool benefits. So add extra potassium to the diet. That's the first thing that I think you can look at. The second thing is, for a lot of people who have high blood pressure, one of their problems is that their body doesn't make enough nitric oxide. So nitric oxide is the chemical that your blood vessels themselves release. You have, this blood vessel, if you think of it like a garden hose or whatever, there's actually a lining on the inside of that blood vessel. It's called the endothelium. The endothelium itself produces nitric oxide. And when it produces nitric oxide, it causes the blood vessel to expand. So it's a vasodilator, they call it. Yeah. That vasodilation mechanism of nitric oxide is really powerful, and it's the master kind of regulator for blood flow and blood pressure in the body. And there are things out there that can help with nitric oxide production. One of them that I like in particular is cocoa. So cocoa flavanols. Flavanols are part of this family of antioxidants. They're probably the most important family of compounds that are found in plants that have, biological effects that are good for the heart, or these flavanols and flavonoids. And in cocoa, we know that those particular flavonoids, these are the ones that make dark chocolate better for you than milk chocolate, right? Those have the ability to help your body produce more nitric oxide. And there's very, very good research on it. In fact, the research is so good that the FDA, a couple of years ago, actually allowed what they call a qualified health claim. So this is different than what you see on supplements. On supplements, you see something called a structure function claim, which is, relatively mild, saying that it can help you to maintain normal health. in this case, they say that if you take 500 milligrams of cocoa flavanols every day, you can actually reduce your risk of heart disease by 29%. That's pretty significant. And it does it through this mechanism of nitric oxide, which is related to blood pressure. So I think cocoa flavanols is a great way for people to reduce their risk of heart attacks and heart disease, and also help to maybe potentially manage blood pressure. As I said, you need to talk to a physician before you start it. But so, and you can get those cocoa flavanols in a pill form. There's a product out there. It's called CocoVia, and they have the right amount in a pill that you can take, or you can add cocoa to your coffee in the morning, for example. In fact, there are coffee alternatives out there now which are based on cocoa that you can buy, which is kind of cool. But not all cocoa is made the same. And you don't want to get the cocoa that has sugar in it, right?
Right.
So, and the other thing about cocoa is when Europeans first started importing cocoa from South America, they knew it was really bitter and kind of hard to drink. Right. And so they invented this process. It was actually invented in the Netherlands, and they call it the Dutch process. So if you've ever seen cocoa that you buy on the shelf, like in the baking aisle or whatever, it'll say Dutch process on it. Right. That Dutch process is the process of adding an alkalinizing agent to cocoa to destroy the flavanols, because the flavanols are the thing that make it bitter.
Interesting.
Wow. So you want undutched cocoa that's non-alkalinized, because then it has flavanols in it. And there are brands out there that actually guarantee the amount of flavanols. In fact, the company that I'm running now, Wellvine, we sell a combination of our Chardonnay grape with cocoa flavanols that guarantees you 500 milligrams of flavanols per serving. So that's something that I think is really, really interesting for people to do. You can also get those same effects on nitric oxide, or similar effects, by taking a couple of amino acids. One's called L-arginine. So some of you may be familiar with it. You can get that in pill form too. That creates nitric oxide in the body. L-citrulline does as well. So you can take that in supplement form. And then there are some botanicals, and the evidence is pretty good on these. I wouldn't say that it's definitive. It certainly doesn't rise to the level of a qualified health claim like FDA allowed for cocoa, but grapeseed extract, there's a number of grapeseed extracts that have some studies on helping with blood pressure. And you mentioned another one, which is garlic. It has a couple of studies out there. So good. Those are things you can look at, things you can try. But again, talk to a doctor or pharmacist before you try any of them.
Yeah, when I'm coaching drivers and they come in the program, I mean, the very first thing, of course, I recognize they've got elevated hypertensive, and I tell them all the time, ask them the first question: have you been, prescribed blood pressure medicine? And typically they have. And so the first thing, you need to take it, right? You need to be compliant. I said, because what it's going to do is help us get you to where you need to be, but you got to do it. And it's sad, but so many drivers, Scott, they don't like it because they don't like the way it makes them feel. And then the other issue, then they get close to coming up for recertification 30 days out, and if they think they doubled the dose, it'll do, they can make up for it. And,
that's really dangerous.
Super dangerous, super dangerous. And the other thing they don't understand is they think smoking to them calms them down, but it elevates their blood pressure.
It does.
And I go to these sessions and I'll see the drivers out there meandering around outside waiting to go in and get their physical, and they're all out there smoking. I'm going, guys, what are you doing? Well, I'm trying to calm down, Bob. I said, well, you're not doing yourself any favors, friend. I mean, you can't do that. If you want to, you need to go drink a bottle of water right now and take a walk and relax that way. But yeah, true. The things we're talking about, and that's what makes it very tough, Scott, in the driver population, because typically the last doctor visit they had was the last DOT physical they had. But they have to take it upon themselves that they've got to be responsible and see a physician.
Yeah, for sure. So just to add to what you were saying, they probably don't realize this. Most people don't. Nicotine is a vasoconstrictor. Nitric oxide is a vasodilator. So it expands blood vessels. Nicotine actually, it activates your sympathetic nervous system and constricts your blood vessels.
Yeah.
So it may make them feel calmer, but it's narrowing their blood vessels. Pharmacologically, it acts like a drug to narrow blood vessels.
Yeah.
So it's one of the worst things that you can do if you're trying to improve your blood pressure is to use nicotine. There are other ways to calm yourself, and there are a few natural ways to do it. My favorite one is probably something called L-theanine. L-theanine is an amino acid. It's found in green tea, and it's actually, they think it's the reason why green tea became part of the ritual that Zen Buddhist monks use when they meditate and when they're trying to, get into a calm and focused state, is because of this amino acid. It changes your brain waves. And what it does is it gets rid of all the background noise, all the kind of white noise that distracts you and makes you anxious. It helps to kind of get rid of that so that you can focus on whatever it is that you need to focus on. So I think L-theanine is a really, really good way to calm yourself without sedating you and making you feel drowsy or something. So that's a good thing. And then, of course, the other thing that everybody can do that's really, really simple and easy is breathing techniques. Yep. Like box breathing. I don't know if people are familiar with box breathing. They call it box breathing because you exhale for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 4 seconds, inhale for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 4 seconds, right? That's why they call it box breathing, right? Because you go down, hold, up, hold, down, hold, up, and it really works. This is a technique that Navy SEALs use to help to lower their heart rate and, kind of help them to calm and to center. So just a little thing like box breathing, maybe some theanine. Theanine can help you to calm down. It can put you in a good state to go to sleep. It doesn't make you sleepy, but it puts you in that state where you're ready for sleep. So those are some things that they can do for stress management. And that's what I would encourage drivers to do. Stay away from nicotine, though. It's, like I said, one of the worst things you can do.
That box breathing, that is a great tip for drivers standing out waiting to go in and get their blood pressure checked, right?
It is. Yeah, for sure. It's so simple, so easy to do. And we know that people...
It's free.
It's free. Yeah, it's free. It doesn't require any training or anything like that, right? So,
nice. That is a great tip. Got to cut that out and use that in a special promo. So that's great. There was one other thing you had mentioned earlier, and I wanted to come back around to it, and that is magnesium.
Yeah.
A lot of drivers suffer from sitting. Also refer to it restless leg, right? Or a lot of cramping and so forth. And magnesium has gotten a lot of praise here over the last probably at least 2 years, if not a year, of the benefits of magnesium. I know there's 3 different types, but magnesium has really turned out to be a pretty powerful supplement, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of really great benefits to magnesium. And magnesium is one of those things that probably a lot of people don't get enough of. The places where you get magnesium in your diet are mostly like green leafy vegetables. Right. So spinach and kale and stuff like that. They have a lot of magnesium in it. Some nuts will have magnesium in pretty high quantities, but it's mostly plant-based foods and things that maybe people aren't getting as much of as they should. You don't have a lot of magnesium in meat. You don't have a lot of it in, white flour or dairy products or things like that. So magnesium is pretty common as a nutrient on the list of things that people don't get enough of. And it's really important for muscle function. It's really important for heart function, and it's really important for brain function. So those 3 things alone are good reasons why people need to ensure that they get enough magnesium. You mentioned the different forms of magnesium. Unlike calcium can be pretty hard to absorb, especially in people who have poor digestive function, people who don't produce enough hydrochloric acid naturally in their stomach, which happens as people get older or they become kind of inactive. They become what they call hypochlorhydric, which means they don't produce enough hydrochloric acid. So calcium can be a little tougher to absorb. Magnesium isn't that tough to absorb. I'm not as concerned that people get the right type of magnesium, although there are some studies out there that suggest that if you take magnesium in a form that includes an amino acid to it, that maybe it reaches the brain a little better or does some other things. So you could take magnesium glycinate, which is probably one of the more cost-effective of the amino acid forms of magnesium. Probably the fastest and quickest way to get magnesium is a form that's used by cyclists, because they're burning through all this stuff and they need to make sure they don't get cramps and whatever. And that's magnesium chloride. So, just like you have, I told you about using potassium salt, which is potassium chloride, instead of sodium chloride, which is regular table salt. You also have magnesium chloride. Magnesium chloride is found in seawater, for example. It's the biggest form of magnesium in seawater. That's really quick to absorb, easy to use that way. So that's one you could take if you're exercising or if you're, on a bike or doing something like that. But in general, magnesium isn't that hard to absorb. So I'm more concerned that people get it than which form they get. I don't think that's nearly as important.
Good. Well, Scott, this has certainly been very enlightening. You gave us a ton of information that people would have to go to school to get. So I sincerely appreciate it. There's just so much that we can extract from this to help the drivers, and I sincerely appreciate it because I know you're a busy guy. But spreading your knowledge, like you talked about before, especially to this underserved population, is so valuable. I really sincerely appreciate it. So.
Happy to help. I mean, drivers are the lifeblood of our nation, right? It's like they're the they're the red blood cells in the circulatory system of our country. So I think it's really, really important that we do everything we can to help them.
That's how all those supplements get to the store, right?
That's right.
I'll never forget. I was talking to a food manufacturer several years ago. What was it? I can't remember the name. Nutrisystems. And they reached out to me actually, and they were very interested in, how they could help drivers. And so we came up with this project. We did a pilot and where they supplied the meals, healthy meals for drivers. We had 25 truck drivers and 25 bus drivers, and we did it for 90 days, and we coached them and they provide the meals. And the results were crazy. I mean, just everything we'd expect, right? The blood pressure dropped, they lost the weight, and, get through the coaching. It was just, I still have all the data I kept from it because, and the idea was, okay, they're going to roll this out and they're going to, create special packaging for truck drivers and so forth. And I get a call from the vice president just right before we said, Bob, I'm sorry, but I've got to renege on what we were going to do. I got to back off of it. And I go, why? And they go, well, we just signed a big deal with Walmart. We're going to be supplying meals for Walmart for the stores, and it's going to be a huge project, and we're just not going to be able to take anything else new on. I said, let me ask you a simple question. How do you think that food is going to get there?
Yeah, there you go.
A truck driver is going to take it. What are you missing here? I mean, you talk about a marketing machine. I said, you've got a chance to really use this as a great marketing tool that not only you're providing this new product and healthy food, but you're keeping drivers. I mean, just, I have to go on about it, but they couldn't see it, and they couldn't follow through. So
no, that's too bad. That is short-sighted. I think very few people have a real appreciation for how all the things that make their lifestyle possible actually end up in their hands. You got
it. They really do. Yeah. So, all right, my friend, thank you so much. Look forward to it. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you next month in Las Vegas, and we'll catch up. And thanks, everybody. We're going to get this edited up, probably hopefully get it out by next week. So thanks again, Scott.
Thanks, Bob. Safe travels, my friend.
You do, buddy.
Okay, bye.